Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another one of my Stargirl videos and my review of the 7th episode of the first season, otherwise titled Shiv Part 1. There's a Shiv Part 2 coming next week, but for now, let's talk about that first showdown between the two characters. Okay, so the first thing here is I'm tempted to say that Courtney probably by the end of the episode has learned her lesson. You know, the importance of training, the importance of teamwork, the importance of knowing your enemy. But this though isn't really the first time that she's pulled this, that she's not learned from her mistakes, that she's gone on her own and never listened to Pat. So instead of saying that I think she might have learned her lesson this time around, I'm just gonna say, okay, she might have, hopefully she did, and we're gonna discover that on next week's episode. But another thing though that I'd like to add over here is the way Shiv and Courtney's relationship is going. That kind of kept me on the edge of my seat throughout the episode. I was definitely worried that Courtney would end up deciding to, try and recruit Shiv for the Justice Society, the new Justice Society. When we know Shiv is a villain, when we know from the comics that Shiv is gonna end up on the side of bad, Shiv is gonna end up with the Injustice Society or as a member of the Injustice Society, and we know that before that she started her villainy career working with her father next to her father, both of them teaming up together on the pages of the comics and starting her villainy career against Stars and S.T.R.I.P.E. So Pat as S.T.R.I.P.E. and Courtney in her first iteration as the Star-Spangled Kid, the second Star-Spangled Kid on the pages of the comics. But okay, we've got a lot to talk about on this video other than just my opinions and my thoughts. I think I give this episode an 8 out of 10. I love the introduction of a villain. I mean, Shiv or Cindy is your regular high school bully from the pages of any comic book from any TV series, except she has a little bit of an extra edge because her villainy is deep-seated. It's not just about the bullying at school, it's a little bit more than that. She's a villain deep down, a villain her father experimented on, and we did see that close to the end when she basically insta-healed upon being attacked by Stargirl. But okay, from the beginning to the end, the first thing I'd like to mention here is the voice of Dr. Midnight singing along with Beth. That was quite the entertaining touch at the very beginning of the episode. Cindy Berman is front and center from the very beginning of the episode. You could tell she is a villain, the way she couldn't care less about the situation with the two Henrys standing at the door to Henry Sr.'s room, kind of forcing herself over there to walk in with that plant. We do know later that this is all part of a plan. I mean, caring about Henry Jr. It's not real care. She doesn't want to date this guy. She wants to break it off with him. That's what she tells her father. She is with him because her father believes that he's got abilities and he might end up in need for that set of abilities if Brainwave Sr. does not wake up from his coma by the time they've got to execute their plan. But okay, another thing about Shiv over here and her father is she did have a similar team up to the one that she has with him on the series, on the pages of the comics. But it's not just that, she's not just teaming up with her father on the pages of the comics, she's teaming up with her father to fight against Stars and S.T.R.I.P.E., to fight against Pat and Courtney. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities over here to the comics. There's a lot of things being kept intact from the source material. Cindy's first appearance as well was on the first issue of Stars and S.T.R.I.P.E. debuted as a villain on a later issue of the same, so from a comic book perspective it made a lot of sense on this episode that her first showdown is not with the entire newly formed JSA, but rather with Courtney alone. But there's still a lot more about Shiv on this episode. So for one thing, Cindy's reference to her father as a great chemist. That's a reference to his scientist status in the comics, a brilliant one at that as well. We've also got her talk about wanting to be part of the ISA, a reference to her being a member on the pages of the source material, but during the Johnny Sorrow reign over the Villainous team-up, rather than the Wizard's reign, which is paralleled here by the Icicle reign. Her persistence on proving she is more than her father gives her credit for, that she is of real value, that's all set towards her comic book villainous origin, part of her need to prove herself to her father, to prove her worth to him, to please him as well on the pages of the comics. The robotic dragon staff that we see in the Dragon King's lair, the one that spouts fire, the one that she uses closer to the end of the episode when she's fighting Courtney, that's pretty much the other kind of weapon that she uses on the pages of the comics, besides all the blades that are all over her suit. But alright, one last thing before we move on to other characters on the episode. Cindy is down there in the ISA's lair when Courtney as Stargirl follows Anaya, and it is the moment that she puts on the armored suit and debuts as Shiv. Now I've mentioned this earlier, but not starting off against the entire JSA or another member of the JSA, but rather starting off against Stargirl is pretty true to the comics, and I did like that, because once again she started or debuted on the pages of the comics, on the pages of Stars and Stripe. Let's move on though to other characters here, because I like how this episode, being titled Shiv and all, did cover other characters, did give us insight on other characters. Okay, let me start off by saying thanks to the writing for Rick, and thank you Rick, but someone had to tell Beth her excitement is a disaster waiting to happen. The great say it louder statement at the very beginning of the episode that was much needed. Circling back to Shiv though, but only to talk about another character, Jenny Williams. I did call it last week that she will get tired of Cindy Berman, her attitude, and the way that she treats her opens room for a lot of great things for Jenny as well, from possibly being the one female version of Johnny Thunder on the pages of the comics to possibly becoming the show's version of Jade, you know, the upcoming Green Lantern, to join the Justice Society, this young version of the Justice Society, and daughter to none other than Alan Scott. But okay, yet another character to talk about. Now, on this week's episode, the show once again focuses on Janitor Justin, and apparently it is confirmed that Janitor Justin is going to end up being the Shining Knight. I mean, yeah, a lot of things on this episode did confirm it as well, but it is confirmed by the title of either the 10th or the 11th episode of the season, Shining Knight. But yeah, we've got a lot here, a lot of decent foreshadowing at the beginning of the episode that leads into the end of the episode. You know, the thank you m'lady when Courtney picks up his floor mop. The entire interaction between the two of them is telling us, okay, this guy is going to become a member of this team, or is going to help and aid this team. The horse on the calendar that he stares at the 10 minutes marker of the episode, followed by the way he looks at himself in the mirror, and then the sword that he's got over there. That tells us more about who he is, that he's none of the characters that a lot of people suspected, but rather the Shining Knight, as we've been speculating on these videos for a few weeks now. But there is finally his entrance with that sword at the end of the episode, saving Courtney from Shiv, and while that's clearly yet another hint to him being the Shining Knight, there's actually more to it. The focus on the Janitor Justin character on this episode, the focus on the fact that he is indeed the Shining Knight out of the comics, that isn't really a coincidence. That is very true to the comics, because in the comics he would team up with Stargirl and S.T.R.I.P.E in facing off with the Dragon King and Shiv. So yeah, all of this is basically an Easter egg to the comics, and all of it as well is true to the fact that this kind of team-up happens on the pages of the source material, on the very pages of Stars and Stripe. But yet another character to talk about over here is Henry King Jr. Henry's arc continues from last week. His abilities are still kicking in quite hard, hurting him heavily, making the guy quite miserable too. Once again, we have got an episode titled Brainwave Jr. this season, confirming what I've expected all along since the premiere of the season. You know, he's happening this season. Brainwave Jr. is happening this season. Now, while I still do think that the possibility does still exist he might start off his superpowered career coerced into working with the Injustice Society, I do think it's a lower possibility. I mean, yes, the Dragon King plans on using him, but the way the series has been presenting Henry himself so far, you know, feeling bad for Yolanda, what happened to her because of him, getting tired of Cindy, all of that put together hints towards the fact that he's gonna be erring on the side of good. Sooner or later, he's gonna be erring on the side of good. But I think it's gonna be sooner rather than later. I think if he goes bad at the very beginning, it's gonna be because of coercion rather than anything else. He's not gonna do that willingly. But okay though, the last thing about Henry Jr. is the first time he uses his powers on this episode. Kinda reminds me of Mel Gibson in Helen Hunt's What Women Want, because he's cheating on a test, mostly from the girls around him. That's what Nick Marshall did on the movie. You know, he's hearing women's thoughts, and he's stealing ideas from Helen Hunt's character in order to further his own career. But alright, what else? We've got the use our kids to find the kids that formed the new JSA statement. That's an obvious reference to the future of most of these kids, if not all of them, because almost every one of them is a villain. Artemis is the next Tigress, Cindy obviously is Shiv, Isaac is gonna be the next Fiddler, and finally Cameron, he's gonna be the next Icicle. But we do even get a mention of Isaac Bowen by Anaya, his mother, you know, the sensitive boy, the comic book Fiddler, another villain of the younger generation in the making. We're also getting history lessons from Pat, you know, Sportsmaster. He appeared for the first time battling against Wildcat and Green Lantern, part of which, by the way, is true to the comics, an Easter egg to the comics, because the very first time that Sportsmaster appeared on the pages of the source material, he was indeed battling against Alan Scott. The other reference made by Pat over here that is of importance is about the Fiddler, you know, male, Caucasian. That's definitely got us circling back to last week's episode, you know, the talk about Anaya's husband probably being able to bring Henry King Sr. out of his coma. So yeah, there's another Fiddler in the mix. Where is he at the moment? We don't really know, but there is another Fiddler in the mix, and that would exclude the third possible Fiddler, the son, Isaac Bowen. But yeah though, all in all, it's a great episode. Next week continues the story of Shiv. It's gonna be titled Shiv Part 2. There's gonna be a little bit more about her. Hopefully the Dragon King as well is gonna join in on this action, and hopefully if it's just him and Shiv, the other side of the fight is gonna only include Stars and Stripe, or Stargirl and Stripe, and that is going to make it very true to the comics. That said though, I did like this episode. I did like the Shiv costume, very true to the comics. Not really an exact replica, but pretty close, very solid. Loved the blades, they're part of her weapons on the pages of the comics. Loved the dragon staff too. Didn't really expect to see it this early, so that was a great addition as well. Let me know in the comments though what you thought of this episode. Let me know if there are any Easter eggs that I missed on this video, and let me know what you think is going to happen over the course of the next few episodes. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Stargirl or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this review. Stay safe and have a great day.